Good morning and welcome to Empower You, Securing the Black Vote in 2024. I'm Melanie Lowe, Executive Producer of UMTV's The Culture Program, and your host for today's show. We'd like to welcome back all of the alumni who are joining our studio audience, our watch party here on the University of Miami campus, and those of you streaming live from home. Thank you for joining us and for participating in this important discussion. Empower You, a part of the University of Miami Black Alumni Society's virtual reunion, will be moderated by myself and Aston Hayes, President of the Black Alumni Society. Joining us are Calvin Hughes, a 6-time Emmy-winning broadcast journalist, and Michael Langley, Executive Director of Florida Justice Incorporated, both of whom bring a wealth of experience and insight to the discussion. We look forward to an engaging and enlightening conversation. But first, let's meet the panelists. Aston Hayes is a passionate advocate for Black student life at the University of Miami. She has been involved in various activities and organizations since her college days and continues to support the University Black Alumni Society as a board member. As the inaugural Assistant Dean for Belonging and Inclusion, Dr. Christopher Allen Clark leads the efforts to advance belonging and inclusion at the University of Miami School of Law. He has over 16 years of experience in higher education and has received several awards for his work on diversity and inclusion. Calvin Hughes is a veteran news anchor for WPLG Local 10 with 6 Emmys and 17 years of experience. He's covered major stories in South Florida and Cuba and interviewed 3 Haitian presidents. He's also a community leader, a father of 3, and a member of Kappa Alpha Psi. Michael J. Langley is a leader and a visionary who strives for social justice. He's won awards, created partnerships, and influenced policy to help marginalized communities. He's passionate about diversity and innovation. Now, let's get things started. Please welcome the President of the Black Alumni Society, Aston Hayes.
Thank you, Melanie. Good morning, Canes. I feel like Trevor Noah today, kicking off the Daily Show. But my name is Aston Hayes, and I proudly serve as your University of Miami Black Alumni Society President. On behalf of the UMBAS, we appreciate you joining us and hope that you are able to take something away from this program to take back to your communities. The board and the Black Alumni Reunion Committee want to provide programming that resonated beyond the campus and touched on intergenerational issues. We also wanted to do something a little unorthodox outside of the usual virtual Zoom panels. So we hope you enjoy this program that the students of UMTV's The Culture, a show highlighting the Black experience through culture, politics, entertainment, and sports, produced for you. Thank you to Elena Polk, Ben Easy, Melanie Lowe, and Nia Williams for helping to bring this vision to life. A little secret, if you're on campus now, head to Topple for the watch party and reception hosted by our UMBAS President-elect, Jason Superstar. There will be a delicious spread provided by Grown, a restaurant concept by 2-time NBA champion Ray Allen and his wife Shannon Allen. At Grown, they believe food should be delicious, organic, and inspiring. Please check them out if you are in the South Florida area. The political climate this year has been one that has continually risen as the months go on and as topics compound. We thought it was important for our community to understand those topics and how they affect our lives and ultimately what's in it for us. Regardless of your views on politics, if you live in this country, you are affected whether you choose to be a part of the process or not. If nothing else, be educated on the issues, all the players in the game, and how you can create change on a local level. Since the beginning of my term, the focus of the board has been collaboration. To date, we have done programming with United Black Students, National Pan-Hellenic Council, Global Black Studies, Athletics, LGBTQ Canes, Multicultural Student Affairs, U Trailblazers, Topple Career Center, and now UMTV of the School of Communications, where I received my Bachelor of Science. The purpose of the focus on collaboration is not only to create synergy, but as the quote says, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. This theme of collaboration also falls into the new goals of the university, with Dr. Patricia Whiteley taking on the role of Senior Vice President for Student Affairs and now Alumni Engagement. If you are in the Atlanta area on Tuesday, March 5th, please join her and Atlanta Canes for a special reception prior to Pancakes with Pat at the Waldorf Astoria. Information on where to go will be shared later on in the show. The president of Atlanta Kings, Joshua Gray, and his board have been doing a phenomenal job to make sure to reach out to them if you are in the Atlanta area. In addition, if you are in Central Florida, join the Orlando Canes together with fellow University of Miami alumni David Mullins, CEO of Blue Maho Capital, for a night of networking, professional development, and insightful conversation about the importance of the U in his business journey, the support he received to start his company, and utilizing the University of Miami Launchpad for his first startup. Last but not least, if you are in the area, join us on campus for community service at 11 a.m. tomorrow, Saturday, February 24th, and Sunday, February 25th for church service with the United Black Students for Black Awareness Month. During the remainder of the weekend, regardless of your denomination, if you have never heard our own Senior Director of Engagement, Darcel Streeter, pray she can stir a soul. And we'll be opening up the service on Sunday. Lastly, there are many ways to get involved with UMBAS through many of our committees, including mentorship, scholarship, fundraising, communications, or if you have an idea that we should be involved in, please reach out and let us know. We are thirsty for new and exciting programs. We are currently working on a mentorship workshop with Topple dealing with STEM, as well as planning for Juneteenth. If nothing else, because we know the revolution will be televised, will not be televised, it will be tweeted, make sure to follow us on all social media platforms at Black Alumni to stay up to date. So before we start the show, I want to leave you with a quote from multi-Grammy award-winning rapper and activist Killer Mike. Government should fear the people, not the other way around. Simply put, know the best way to apply pressure. On that note, let's start the show. All right, we're going to start with voter rights. So we'll start with you.
Voting rights.
Yeah.
Well, I think in some states we have found that some voting rights have been infringed upon. Mm-hmm. I think we have found that we live in a democracy, but yet there is this effort that's underway, this current that's underway, this political current that's underway that is not allowing people to use their voting rights, from being able to use Dropbox, and you can name the issues. I always give this example because I've covered politics in other countries. I'll give the example of a place that's in political chaos, Haiti, for example. When they were having their elections, they would have their voting days on Saturdays. We have ours on Tuesdays. Many people would go out. The purpose of having people vote on a Saturday is to make sure as many people would vote as possible. Mm-hmm. Why don't we move ours to a weekend? Why is ours still on a weekday, on a Tuesday, when many people are not able to get out to vote? So I think people have to be more aggressive in this democracy. They have to know that that the vote is, even though it's a right, it's not given. They have to be very aggressive to go out and utilize their voting rights.
I think that's an excellent point, and what I come back to is how can we continue to mobilize and engage Black voters, right? Mm-hmm. And Florida Justice Institute has been doing this work for over 45 years, and a part of that effort has actually been increasing ballot access for those residents with systemic and widespread implications. One key example is working with the Florida Caucus of Black Legislators versus Crosby, which mandated that the Department of Corrections actually work to assist formerly incarcerated returning citizens to restore their voting rights upon the release process. And also in recent years, FJI attorneys had actually worked to craft some of the language for the ballot, the Amendment 4 ballot initiative that went and passed with 65% of the vote from the electorate, and it actually codified in the state constitution the opportunity for those with a felony conviction to actually automatically get their rights restored, and so upon completion of their sentence. And I say that because, as Brian Stevenson put it, the true measure of our character is how we treat the poor, the disfavored, the accused, the incarcerated, and the condemned. And I offer that context because democracy, I think, is like a garden. And voting is like the seeds. In order for humanity to thrive, I think we have to water those seeds in order for those gardens to nourish our collective soul. Do you want someone in there who is going to who would poison that garden, right? And those seeds to really maintain it? But no, obviously we all need to eat, right? And to sustain life and to nourish those seeds. And that's actually where the word guardian comes from. If you think about it, we all have to be guardians of democracy. And so like that garden, I think democracy takes patience, but we have to keep it healthy, right? But in the meantime, I think we have to really meet people where they are. It's very important. But the best way to do that, in my view, is you have to know who your local and state elected officials are. And so no matter who represents your district, I think it's important you need to sign up for their newsletter, for example. You go to their website and to really just to stay up to date on not just the latest, but what their record is, right? And so, whether you're happy or unhappy with their performance, your ballot's your voice. And, we're all adults, so you don't let anybody do the speaking for you, right? And so, going back to my garden metaphor, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
That is true. That is true. That's a good, I want to ask you, because you work with younger people, the distrust of the political system and a lot of young people not voting. What is your thoughts on how to, I guess, change that, or, the best campaign or method to get young people out to the polls?
Yeah, no, great question. And that was actually going to be a nice follow-up to some of the points that have been raised. I think when you talk about the rights, right, in order to even, have a sense of what rights are, there has to be a level of knowledge and awareness. Because the disadvantage and advantage that younger generation has is that they're getting inundated with information all the time, and they have to vet that in the snap of a finger to determine what is and what isn't. And so that can also create confusion, that could create apathy, that could create a form of hopelessness because of the vehicle in which information comes in. So I think when it comes to young voters, they may not be as apathetic, but they may be also so inundated that they feel a sense of paralysis when it comes to what to do. And if you think about someone who is very knowledgeable about rights versus those who aren't, do I have the ability and awareness to know what rights look like? What does it feel like? And how can I protect and defend those things and be aware and knowledgeable of those things? So I think for young voters, the more we can create spaces where they are to educate them around, again, what it means to have a right to vote. A perfect example, I was invited, one of the 162 black men at the halftime of the Miami Heat game to represent what happened in the 1890s when black contractors were vital in incorporating the city of Miami. I intentionally wanted young black men to be in that space because to walk out on that court with that shirt on and hear that story would feel something different that they may not have felt. That lets them know that this is not something that is so far removed, but also the power that you have to have access to information, to know your rights is important, and not just telling them what is and what isn't, giving them the tools to be vigilant and use their resources to vet so they can have an ability to have a decision to make a path as far as what to do. And so I think that's a key part, educating them on what the moment is, the shoulders that we stand upon, and giving them the awareness to know what looks right and what isn't, and then protecting the things that may be risky for them. Like you talked about absentee ballots, mail-in ballots, the ways in which we can strategically set ourselves up so we can cast our vote. I think if we do more of that, I think that'll kind of lessen the level of apathy when it comes to voting, because I do think our young population is engaged, and they've turned this thing on its head since 2020.
Well, they have to feel engaged. But they have to feel engaged.
Yep.
I mean, they have to feel like an issue matters to them. If you talk about, so for example, one issue that we have found in covering politics in local news at least, is the border crisis is a big issue for a lot of people. If you talk to young folks, the border crisis isn't a major issue for them, but student loan debt is, which is why the Biden administration has made that such a big issue for them to try to bring them in and say, you matter too. Young people don't realize how critical their vote is. How critical, I mean, their vote is, I mean, they can actually swing the campaign one way or the other, but they don't see it that way. They just see it as, oh, it's just an exercise in democracy. No, it really does. One vote does matter. There have been some campaigns, some politicians that have gotten into office based on the fact that it was only a 2 or 3 vote swing in that election. So one vote can be the difference between one candidate getting in and your candidate not getting in. You said something that really struck a chord with me as a professor too, not just as a news anchor, is something that I tell a lot of my students. Say, can you name me 3 people on the U.S. Supreme Court? Can you name me 2 representatives from your state? Obviously, we know we have students who come from all around the country and all around the world. Most people cannot. And I say, well, you can't possibly even care about the issues and know what they're talking about if you don't know who they are. Most students cannot name who their state rep is, can't name who their city councilman is, and certainly cannot name you 3 or 4 people from the U.S. Supreme Court, but yet these people are taking away your ability to, in some ways, be a full female.
Thank you so much, Calvin. But next, we'll discuss voter turnout in the election. But first, we have a message for you prepared by Dr. Ronald L. Jackson II. Dr. Jackson is a distinguished scholar, award-winning author, and a tenured professor at the University of Miami School of Communication. His research focuses on the study of masculinity, identity negotiation, and race and culture. He's also a former dean, past president of NCAA and ECA, and an International Communication Association fellow.
We all have a fascinating tendency to think about our voting as it pertains to our personal considerations first, before thinking about the broader community. It makes sense that we would do this. It's a lot like being a passenger on an airplane and reaching for the mask for yourself first before trying to help others. When you go to the polls this year, there are several platform issues that affect you and the communities around you. Some of the most controversial issues include educational reform, abortion rights, reproductive freedoms, healthcare, social security, immigration, artificial intelligence, foreign policy, and economic stability. Here in the state of Florida, we have other concerns pertaining to anti-woke and don't say gay legislation. As with all elections, we have an opportunity to register our concerns through our vote or simply remain silent. And when we do this, we become effectively muted on these issues. I can't tell you how to vote, but I do encourage you to look at the facts. How have the candidates voted on issues you care about the most? I am deeply concerned. In a country that has issued a promise through its Declaration of Independence that it will protect our inalienable rights as human beings to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, we return year after year to challenges to our civil liberties. Beyond egregious voter fraud, we are also confronted with attacks on our democracy within our schools. Our educational system is designed to train individuals how to be critical thinkers and informed citizens. But how will we train students to think critically when we remove their access to books and curricula pertaining to race and racism, heterosexism, and LGBTQ rights? Where will they learn about the indigeneity of non-white groups in America before it was discovered? How are they to understand clearly what it means to have socio-political inequities that systematically propel gentrification, redlining, and gerrymandering? If it is true what Cornel West says when he asserts that black people's humanity is a relatively new discovery of the West, then we as individuals concerned about the black vote in 2024 ought to think about this very critically. What are the next steps? Each of the socio-political unfreedoms experienced by black people in this country have occurred because of a socio-political climate fortified and allowed by those we elect. Think about who you want to represent your interests in Congress and in the White House. We need your vote now more than ever. There is no time for inaction. We cannot afford silence. We need you at the polls. There's no time for political circus. We can't let the media carnival blind us to our civic duty. There is no time for attacks on our civil liberties. We need our kids thinking critically. It's time to act. It's time to stand up and be counted. It is time to vote in 2024.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. What an important message. But let's move to the next topic, voter turnout.
All right, we'll start back with you, Calvin.
Voter turnout. I think we were ending by talking about that, about how critical the vote is for young people. Many of them are moving into adulthood, so they don't really see, they've seen their parents vote. So many of the students are thinking, well, why does my vote matter? And maybe it hasn't been explained to them. I know for me, I didn't come from a household where my mom really explained the importance of voting. But as I got older and as I became a journalist, I saw how important it is to vote. It is critically important, to be clear, it is critically important for all young people to vote, because we have seen if you don't vote, it'll be taken away, you know. And things that you don't want to happen, even on a local level, all politics are local. We've heard that before. I know CNN and some of the other cable networks, news networks, are nationalizing a lot of local issues. But really, you know, it's about your city council person. It's about your state rep. Things happen on a state level and on a city level that I think young people may not, you know, feel the need to go out and vote in municipal elections. But it's critically important that you vote in every single election. And as a journalist, you got to be an independent, but you can decide if you want to be whatever party you want to belong to, but you got to be an independent as a journalist.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. One of the things is local government affects your life on a day-to-day basis far more than the president does. Now, obviously, the president is important, your congressperson's important, but again, local, state elections, they're going to get really focused on those issues. Yeah. So what are those issues, right, that are important to so many of our community, right? I would say, as it's been for decades, wealth creation. So let me just share a few numbers with you. A few years back, Citigroup actually quantified that racial disparities in things like education, home ownership, small business investment, and many other areas resulted in a loss of 16 trillion, that's trillion with a capital T, in our economic value in the U.S. for a 20-year period. Enormous amount. Earlier this month, McKinsey analysis actually discovered that, and I quote, there is nowhere in the United States where outcomes for black residents are equal to those of their white neighbors. Again, that's powerful. That includes places like Miami, Orlando, Tampa, Jacksonville, and really the entire country. They estimate that it would take up to 320 years to achieve actual parity at the current pace. And for our younger generation, CNBC reported just days ago that young black workers aged 16 to 24 earn roughly 82 cents to their white peers $1. And so while that and so many other issues I think are important, as Dr. Jackson had mentioned, we cannot realize life, liberty, or the pursuit of happiness if our democracy isn't intact. Correct. Right? And so I think it really takes a sort of a tri-sector approach to solve some of these complex problems. And so, well, what do I mean by that? That means we need to leverage data. We need to leverage public-private partnerships. We need to, the law obviously comes into play as well, so that the business community can provide the resources, the government can actually enable smarter policies, and social enterprises can up and catalyze some transformational change.
You know, I've been fascinated by something since I've been in television for a while, and I wish I only had 17 years, but I've been around longer on the anchor desk in Philadelphia, Dallas, Kentucky, Indiana, Missouri, other places where I've worked, and in Texas. I worked in Dallas as well. But the issue of reparations for my mother's generation, for example, I'll just give you just one example. And even coming up, I'd say 25 years ago, we heard the talk about conversations about reparations for it to be discussed on the Senate floor, for this to be a real possibility in the state of California, where they're actually looking at ways to redistribute wealth, that to me is fascinating. But it took someone saying, it's going to happen, I'm going to work at it, I'm going to run for office, I'm going to make this an issue. So young people, if you don't think you make a difference, I will tell you, things that I looked at 25 years ago, there's no way that's going to happen. It's now becoming a reality. I'm blown away by it. Juneteenth for many people is, I mean,
Right.
I just did an hour-long special or a half-hour special on Juneteenth last year. I was shocked that my TV station wanted me to go and actually look at the origins of Juneteenth in Texas. But for that, I mean, obviously it became a national holiday due to the death, the tragic death and terrible death of George Floyd. But it was just being discussed. But imagine if it was never even discussed before George Floyd's death. It never would have become reality. I mean, it's just stuff like that. To me, it's mind-blowing that if you just start with an idea and invest by voting and by applying yourself, things can become a reality.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback
Yeah.
on both your points. I
Yeah.
think that's great. And you gave that statement about the question you asked your students around the knowledge of senators and some folks. I think you're thinking about the context of where I am and where we are as like administrators or faculty at the University of Miami, and where we have a large segment of the population that are not Floridians. How do you educate those who are eligible to vote, who are at an institution in the state, how to understand how to vote, and also what things are important on the ballot besides the actual presidential election? And so what we try to do our best is create spaces where we educate our students on what it means to vote, the shoulders we stand on, the implications, but also how do we connect the vote to where things may be more aligned with what you're familiar with. For instance, I'm born and raised in South Florida, and the issues and some of the concerns and things on the ballot in the state of Florida, in the city of Hollywood where I'm from, are maybe more prominent to me because of my proximity. I went to school in Wisconsin, right? And so I may be knowledgeable about some of the grassroots local issues, but am I compelled to feel like that is something that I am more concerned or connected to? So what we try to do is create with some of the places like Get Out the Vote and working with athletics that not only educate on why it's important to vote, not to have us just focus on the general election when it comes to just the president, but also what does it mean if you do vote within your upbringing and socialization, your communities, if you send absentee ballots, and what does it mean for some of those pieces? I think for schools that actually have a lot of out-of-state students, like how do we do that? And are the things that they could vote for here things that would resonate with them to cast their vote here versus wanting to be able to send an absentee ballot or a mail-in ballot or even try to vote somewhere else? Because I think that's the part too. And how do you find that information out in parallels? Because for every single version of what's on the ballot in Florida and municipalities, those things also exist across the country where some of our students, particularly some of our underrepresented students, come from. So I think that piece of education and empowerment also is very, very valuable too.
So Calvin, I have a question for you. I know you're the anchor, so I'm going to interview you for a second. So how do you view the role of sort of Black media and Black-led organizations in sort of informing, but also I would say empowering Black voters?
Boy, that is a wonderful question. You know, because I'm in more of a mainstream role, that's a really tough question for me. But here's what I will say. If you're in the business of media, it's all about informing and giving the right information. We live in an age now where disinformation is king, and the right information, facts take a back seat. There's a saying in TV that don't ever let the facts get in the way of a good story. It's a joke that we tell, but it's now become reality where people just make it up. If it's not right, if it doesn't fit, just make it up. So I think all media, Black media, doesn't matter what role it is, we all have a job to tell the truth and to get the right information out. And know that the president is not king. Biden is not the king. He can't stop every single thing that goes on. The White House is not all powerful, even though some groups have made it out to seem like the White House is capable of doing everything. It's not omnipresent. I mean, everything begins from within, and it begins with us. So I think when we start with that message, I don't think we can go wrong.
I appreciate it, and I would just add, this is difficult following an Emmy-winning anchor, but I think it's got to be an effort that extends beyond Black History Month.
Yes,
right. We're Black every day, and I think it's about creating a dialogue that sparks action, right? And so I think Black media needs to keep telling those compelling stories that are out there, like Juneteenth, as you mentioned, but also I think Black-led organizations, they need to work with the community on implementing the change that they'd like to see, right? And so at the end of the day, I always sort of look at it this way. There's generally sort of three methods that Black voters can work to enable change for important causes. I call it the 3 T's: time, talent, or treasure, right? And so you devote time by maybe volunteering in your local community, serving the public, or you can use your talent, right, to maybe even run for office.
Yes.
I think that's important. Or you could seek appointment to a local board or a county commission, that actually provides input to elected officials or other sort of governmental entities, right? And sort of lastly, you could always invest in organizations like a Florida Justice Institute that does the work daily to create sort of the systemic change. You don't really have to do everything, but I think it's important to help sort of find your niche.
And you just can't sit on the sidelines. I mean, democracy is a contact sport. You got to get into the game.
Thank you so much, guys. The importance of heading out to the polls can't be stated enough. But our last roundtable discussion will focus on geographic distribution. Aston, what do you think?
The geographic distribution. I don't really know too much about the geographic distribution or how it goes. I don't know if we have a map or anything to go off of, but I'm from Chicago, so I know a lot of what we're talking about is Florida. A big thing for us has been the refugees coming. And so I know we've gone through 2 mayors, Black mayors. We have a Black mayor now, and we had Lori Lightfoot previous. And I know, Jamal's is going to be, Brandon is going to be hard because of this refugee situation that we're in now, because they didn't really have a plan of action, and I know that's going on around the country right now. But I think it's just I don't know. I'm gonna toss it to somebody else.
I'm happy to hop in. I think what we're really talking about is how do you sort of foster a dialogue between Black voters who might have different political views, right? And you sort of alluded to that as well. And let me just say this, Black voters are not a monolith. I've been an independent since I first registered at 18, right? And so I came from rural Virginia. So Black people from sort of a similar type of environment, I think, may have different perspectives than someone who came from, let's say, a city, and maybe even vice versa, right? And so I would say engaging differences constructively matters. And so I would sort of recommend you start with identifying the issues that you have sort of the most common ground on, right? I don't know what that might be, but I think everyone, to your point, everyone is entitled to their own opinions, just not their own facts, right? But I think when the discussion begins, you have to have empathy, but also some humility as you get to that discussion. It really adds some credibility to what you're saying, right? And so I think once a consensus gets reached, you have organizations out there that sort of work to come together, and like the National Institute for Civil Discourse, as an example, they take these conversations and actually put them into sort of tangible policy briefs, and they take them to elected officials. They take them to lawmakers in Congress to help sort of resolve those issues that are out there. And so what the outcome is from that is that you have individuals from different stripes, different groups, that they get that satisfaction that they're actually a catalyst for change.
One thing that I've learned is in covering different stories is that people wonder, why do politicians go to certain areas all the time? Why do politicians go to certain areas more often? One thing, because they vote. That's it. And they vote religiously. A former president who was accused of a crime went to federal court in Miami. He left the court in Miami and he went down to a certain area and got a cafecito. He didn't actually get it, but he went to a place where they served cafecito. Why did he go to that area? Why didn't he go to Little Haiti? Why didn't he go to Weston? Why didn't he go to Boca? He's from right down. Why didn't he go there? Because the people in that area in Little Havana, they vote and they vote a certain way and they vote like that all the time. The point is that young people, if you get out there and vote, it'll happen for you. Looks like we have to go.
Wow, what a powerful message. Thank you all for your insight and thoughtful discussion. Coming up after the break, we're going to dive deeper into these important issues and get your questions answered. Empower You, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Empower You, Securing the Black Vote in 2024. Thank you for staying with us. We're going to move into the second portion of our show to answer your questions about the vote and the issues. The first question we want to start out with today, what do you guys think about the role of equity and diversity and inclusion? You know, Governor Ron DeSantis' recent bans on diversity and equity and inclusion in public universities. How is that going to affect voter turnout, especially for the youth?
Well, I'll jump in. I think it goes beyond just public schools. We're starting to see it in the workplace, people getting fired, DEI directors in Hollywood, in corporate, even in the private sector. So it definitely goes beyond the public DEI. It definitely is under attack. And I think we just have to keep pushing harder within ERGs and things of that nature to be able to amplify our voices on those platforms.
Yeah, I guess I'll add to that. You're absolutely right. I think to the previous question about geography, right, I think I'm making an assumption, and it's anecdotal. Folks watched what was happening in Florida around DEI as if that we were an anomaly, and then you could see some of the other types of pushes for anti-DEI legislation start to spread. And I've seen it happen in higher ed, but I've also seen as a response is reputable organizations, institutions have pulled out of having conferences, like for instance, NSBE, the National Society of Black Engineers, pulled their conference out, Alpha Phi Alpha. Yeah. We had our 2025 convention planned to be in Orlando, and we pulled out. And so I think when it comes to just being vigilant and understanding the issue and how it's not just in higher education and it's spreading outside the state and other places, but also how can we respond when it comes to our consumption of a state and our dollars and our ability to show that this is not something that we will be willing to accept as a good signal, but then how do we translate into how we have power within the vote and within the ballot. And so I think those things are timing up really nicely. But to the point about geography, we've seen this now exist in other spaces, but we're also seeing folks in spaces be vigilant when it comes to how they want to prepare, how they want to respond, and the stakes they're willing to go to say our dollars, our communities, our signaling of how we are not going to utilize these spaces in the way that we have before because they're not inclusive means something different. And we're going to take these things to places that may be more inclusive, progressive, and align with value in DEI. So I've seen that as well. But.
Yeah. Listen, this hits close to home for me. I have family members alive today who attended segregated schools. Let me just say that again. I have family members alive today who attended segregated schools. Mm-hmm. And think about that for a second. That wasn't all that long ago, right? And so what does that tell you, right? I know I wouldn't be where I am today without my experience at the University of Miami. I know I wouldn't have had the opportunity to play for the unequivocal greatest team in college football history without it. And I certainly wouldn't be able to launch my career here and then come back years later, right? And so we know a lot of these lawsuits that are happening right now, they're performative. They just are. Like the current one that's targeting black-led venture capital for black women-owned businesses. But it does set, I think, an increasingly dangerous precedent. I think like with school, though, we have to sort of show our work, right? And I was fortunate enough to develop a Business Leaders for Racial Equity action plan. And so you work with people who are influential CEOs that are out there who really work to educate about, engage in, and advocate for sort of the interconnectedness of those things that are known as social determinants. So things like your education, your housing, your healthcare, your criminal justice reform, economic opportunities that are out there. Unfortunately, zip codes play too much of an outsized role in your economic mobility, right? And so I think the savvy people out there, especially business leaders, community leaders, they know that things like proportionate reputation and representation, access to resources that meet people's needs are critical, and a recognition that all viewpoints are valuable, right? they improve communities. But I think it's really clear to me that this is not just a moral imperative, it's an economic one as well. So I think you have to have these leaders that are out there that are bold, that can step in and really lead, right? And I mentioned it earlier, institutional racism literally costs us trillions, right? There are explicitly racist covenants still to this day on home deeds in places like a Chicago, like a Milwaukee, like a Minneapolis, like a Philadelphia, like a Tucson, like a Seattle, St. Louis, Washington, D.C. So all of these different places, right? And so common sense, I think, would tell us that we shouldn't be squandering our economy based on some partisan ideology.
So to that point, what do you see as the most pressing issues for the Black community in the 2024 elections? You know, we're all widespread about the community, but do you see any common ground and issues that Black voters should be looking for in the polls?
Please.
I mean, just a very quick point about DEI. I mean, we have found that, you know, in some places DEI is DEAD. But here's what I think we need to be careful about. You know, I believe that as a man thinketh, then so is he. So as a president of a nonprofit, I've talked to different companies about DEI being DEAD. And they have said to me, just because it's like that in some places, it doesn't mean that we believe in it. So be careful before we just automatically assume and we allow these ideas to envelop our mindset to think that everybody thinks that way just because some people think that way. So go into something thinking that you're going to get the best out of something, not that it's going to be the worst case scenario. That's what I said about DEI. That's good. Now, as for the other issue was the common ground that we all have. I think the common ground is we want democracy to work. Because when democracy works, we want the country to live up to what it has written on paper. We had someone say that. I know we tend to limit this one person who was a doctor to a dream. But his dream was not just so that little white girls and little black boys can play together. His dream was to live up to its principles, this country to live up to its principles. Don't give us that check that's going to bounce. I'm trying to think of the exact words that he used, but live up to what you said you would do, what you said you're going to do. And if democracy works, then everybody benefits. And I think that is the common ground that we first share. First of all, democracy has to survive. I mean, we're living in a time where we don't even know if it's teetering on the edge of not even being around. But I think, secondly, we have to understand that if democracy works, the country works.
Austin, anything?
Let's see. I mean, I guess when it comes to, we have to remember who started the country to begin with. So I don't think, I think somebody had mentioned before, we've come to terms with things that we didn't even think was going to happen at this time. We never thought we'd have a black president. I think we were talking about.
And a female black vice president.
Right,
I mean,
and
people forget
too,
about
yeah.
her.
So it's a lot of things this country we were never supposed to have. So I think we're at a place now that we have to just get people up to par that things are changing and democracy is for everybody. It wasn't originally supposed to be. So I think that's where the issues really come from, is that we have to, put more forward because of that.
So Aston, I wanted to ask you specifically, let's narrow it down a little bit. How do you see us supporting black women's reproductive rights and healthcare, especially in the political climate we're in now?
Ooh, that's a rough one. I always believe it's a woman's choice because it is her health. At the center of it is about women's health. So I know you have some states, like I believe it's Texas, and don't have me lie, I believe it's Texas, and may even be Florida, sexual assault. Women's, if a woman has health issues giving birth to a child, where they won't allow her to abort a fetus, and I'm totally against that in every way, shape, or form. And I feel like everyone should be. It should be that woman and their doctor allowing them to decide how they move forward with their own health, and you asking somebody to risk their life for something that they could easily change the course of that. But at the center of it is it's a woman's health, and it should be a woman's choice, and that's kind of where I stand on that. So.
And I would just add to that Alabama too. You know,
yeah.
there's a Supreme
Yeah. I
Court
mean, it's-
IVF, yeah.
that just declared that frozen embryos are people,
Right.
which seems completely insane to me.
But in quoting Bible scripture
Right.
in a legal document, whatever happened to church and separation of church and state. But anyway, go ahead and make your
Correct.
point.
You know, it would just seem that it's unconscionable to me that the government, first of all, censors sex education. They seek to prevent any form of contraception. They restrict the manner in which a pregnant woman can receive any treatment. They also force her to carry the term. And then, in the case in Georgia, if she happens to miscarry, they prosecute her, right? And so, for me, it's never been about protecting life, according to them, but it's really about supplying their workforce. And so, I think black women are routinely and often solely responsible for saving democracy. I think we certainly need to support them in that effort.
So, Dr. Clark, I want you to kick off this last question. How do you view the role of black media and black-led organizations, as I know you head up some of those, in informing and empowering black voters?
Yes, and I want to follow my colleague. So I would tell you this, and to your point, you know, I would not be a father of a 16-month daughter if I was not able to go through the process of having IVF as an option.
Wow.
And I don't regret that. I'm a man of faith. I'm a PKK. My grandfather was a pastor. I am very religious. I'm a believer. But to be able to have the opportunity to be a father in the state of Florida came from that process that is being taken away. And I felt the impact of my wife not feeling the ability to be a mother, which I can't feel that burden. So I had to say that. I would be remiss if I didn't say that. But I think about media. I think of, you know, I think when it comes to how we use where we are to spread and share information and educate, I think is valuable. I think, you know, in the worst version of, you know, I think of Charlemagne and the Breakfast Club. However you think about them, they bring folks in there, and then depending on who they bring there, they give them the business. My frat brother, Roland Martin, is a mess, but, you know, depending on the platforms and the space, there are conversations happening in places that people may least expect it. I talked about the halftime at the Miami Heat game. So I think when you think about black media and you think about even the spaces where people are going, what are we giving them when they go? And are we giving them something that not only exposes them to something that they can explore, but can they have an opportunity to educate themselves? Because I believe in the empowerment of like this idea, you know, feed you a fish or teach you how to fish. And I can expose you to what happened in the 1890s, but also how can I expose you to learning more education and being knowledgeable about what has happened in the history of a city that you may not have known, and is that more of a powerful tool? And where does that take place? If you ain't going to the basketball game, you might have never seen that. Correct. And so when I think of the platforms, particularly student-led platforms, the spaces that we have with black media, can we create spaces where we can enlighten our folks without feeling like you're indoctrinating them? I think that's a powerful vehicle. But need to be handled with care.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, thank you all for your powerful insight. What a powerful discussion. And unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today's show. But there are still a number of events ahead this weekend. Join us at Topple Career Center after the show for an after party and networking event. And tonight at 6 p.m. on the Foot Green, join us for a Taste of the South and an alumni reunion. On Saturday, it's Black Awareness Month Day of Service. We'll meet at the Lakeside Canopy at 9 a.m. And Sunday morning, a church service at Shalala Student Center. It starts at 11. We would also like to thank our panelists, sponsors, and supporters who made this show possible. Thank you to Christopher Allen Clark, Aston Hayes, Calvin Hughes, Michael Langley, Ronald L. Jackson II, the Black Alumni Society, the School of Communication, UMTV, and the Culture Production Team, and Grown Catering. We leave you with a look at more resources to help you take action. Have a great day. Thank you for tuning into today's conversation, the reunion of the University of Miami's Black Alumni Society Empower You. From historical struggles to present-day challenges, we've shed light on the importance of our voting. But our work doesn't stop here. It's a time to turn our awareness into action. Educate yourselves on voting rights. Educate in discussions with peers and community members, and advocate for coming together. Let's empower each other and make a difference.